Muy buenas tardes.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to everyone. Welcome to the Casa America. So this is the second annual forum on social dialogue. This is high-level discussion on the global deal about fair, sustainable markets. So welcome to all participants, particularly the Second Vice President and Minister of Labour and Social Affairs, Yolanda Diaz, and also Secretary General of the OECD. We call it the OCDE in Latin America. Welcome. So a welcome also to the Ambassador, Manuel Escudero, and the Secretary General of the OECD, Matthias Cormon, and all the ministers and trade union officials, business people, and everyone who's accompanying us. Also, we should mention Gilbert Hongo from the International Labour Organization. So welcome everybody to Gabriel Mistral, who is the first Latin American lady who has won the Nobel Prize for Literature. So it's great to be able to open this meeting in the amphitheater, this second annual forum on social dialogue on the global deal. So I'm absolutely sure that you'll all have the opportunity to analyze the role of social dialogue in this green economy and the management of unconventional methods of labour. So this would be impossible without the ILO and the OECD and the Ministry of Labour. So the subjects that we're going to deal with over these 2 days, these 2 intense days, are fundamental for our common future and our agenda. Looking at these times of crisis, with this transition towards the green economy, sustainable employment, all the challenges we have, and non-conventional methods of work also. So we have to think together how we can advance towards a fairer society which is more inclusive with across the board, so that nobody should be left behind. So this House of America, Casa America, in 2022, it's now 30 years old, so that's 3 decades of trying to analyze what's happening on the Latin American front, culture and arts and society and amongst the citizens, and also 30 years of reinforcing that Latin American link that we have here in Spain, going back to 1992, and we always emphasize the importance of this dialogue, the meetings that we have with Latin America and our relationship, and this is very closely linked to what we're going to be talking about today. So this struggle against inequality, looking for a market with clear, fair rules of participation, inclusive, and including the most vulnerable sectors. This is vital. So this is why we're delighted to have this debate here at our head office. So here we are in Madrid, in Spain. We'll be talking about with political and social representatives, looking for a fair meeting. We have our commission meeting at the second trimester coming up, and we'll be looking at these subjects also to be able to. We need to guarantee a good presidency. So I'm sure you're looking forward very much to hearing our experts, our leaders. So welcome to everybody to Casa to America. And over these 2 days, this will also be the home to all of you. Thank you very much.
Buenas tardes a todos.
Good afternoon to everybody. I'm the Ambassador Escudero, a Spanish ambassador to the OECD, so it's a great honor to be here and to introduce this event of 2 days. Such an important session towards a fairer transition and safe, sustainable labour markets, as the director of the Casa America said. So those 2 things are very much front of mind. So I'd like to go on to English, as this conference will be held in English
I was the ambassador, had realized the importance of the global deal for decent work and inclusive growth from the very beginning. I'm talking about 2018, and at that time still Sweden was the promoter and operated at that moment the global deal. We have a debt of gratitude to Sweden because of their leadership in this endeavor. Later, as you know, it was housed at the OECD, and we, Spain, became in 2018 the 100th member in a ceremony that was held, I remember, in the Ministry of Labor. And ever since, Spain has become an advanced partner. And today, we are here. We are in Spain, we are in Madrid, and Madrid is today the capital of the world, of the social dialogue, of the social pact. And in the current times, that is very timely. In truth, in front of polarization and increasing polarization, the answer, or part of the answer, is social dialogue. Social dialogue has helped us in Spain very clearly to cope with COVID-19. The social dialogue is a very important instrument to work out our recovery. And social dialogue is a very important instrument for all European countries, for our societies to be together, united in front of the war of aggression of Russia against Ukraine, defending democracy. I think that really we can say that social dialogue is the best institutional recipe to ensure that society remains socially integrated and that representative democracy is enriched. We are in a moment of transition, and this is captured by the general theme of this high-level meeting, this ministerial meeting. You have in front of us 2 days of very relevant sessions. But before, let us have the privilege of listening to the opening remarks of the second Vice President of the Spanish government, Yolanda Díaz, the host of this important event, the Secretary General of the OECD, Matthias Cormann, and the Director General of the International Labour Organization, Mr. Gilbert F. Humbo. Minister, the floor is yours.
Buenas tardes.
Good afternoon. President of the OECD, Director General of the ILO, and members of the OECD member countries and delegates from all the countries that are taking part in the Global Deal Conference, dear ministers of labour and social partners, trade unions, and business organisation leaders. Thank you very much for coming along to this meeting. It's a great motive of pride for me to come along here as the Minister of Labour and Second Vice President to welcome you to Casa America. Thank you very much for coming along and for offering us the opportunity Casa America. Okay, so we're going to be talking about the global deal. I'm very grateful to the organization of the OECD for having organized this event because of the importance of the subjects that we're going to handle. So over the course of these 2 days, we'll be looking for an alliance of talent moving towards a key objective to develop social and economic policies that permit inclusive growth and promote decent labor, decent jobs. So we do this in a very unusual context, very complex and very difficult for us with the after the COVID-19 pandemic, we have come across an economic crisis also coinciding with the war in the Ukraine. The energy crisis and also inflation have slowed down our growth, and we see this effect in the day-to-day, in our working conditions, in our homes, in our salaries, and our daily life in SMEs, small and medium enterprises. So this is an unprecedented crisis, and this has emphasized the importance of social dialogue and the need for effective coordination in the European and international sphere, in line with the 2030 goals and the objectives of the ILO. So first of all, because dialogue is always the best antidote against violence, and because social dialogue is also a tool of legitimacy, of democratic legitimacy, which stimulates solidarity and reaches beneficial agreements. So I think these positive factors are positive for individuals and for companies. Spain has taken decisive steps in this direction with 14 major social agreements in this legislature. Social dialogue has been at the source of our successive mechanisms, working employment, the temporary layoffs that we have, and temporary pay over COVID-19, also home working, distance working, and we're also moving towards the objectives laid down in the social charter, in the European Social Charter. We have a social agreement, labour reforms, which are improving tremendously the degree of short-term work and insecure labour, so improving this tremendously. So we have many new contracts signed in Spain, which are stable employment, long-term employment, and this is unprecedented in our democracy. Social dialogue has also been at the source of transforming measures like the Riders Law, which regulates delivery, employment, or also the fair salary system in between the two genders. So this gives us stability, and this favors participation and leads us along a road to transition. Rights cannot be conditional. For our governments, this has to be a superlative mandate, and it's our responsibility to guarantee development and compliance with these. So we've come here to talk about these questions today, the new rights which are arising from our new realities, and also our attitude of preserving what we have achieved with such a huge effort towards more social justice, and also digital rights and widespread digital use. So this social dialogue is vital for a healthy economy, thinking of our new types of work and employment, digitization, new labor relations. So now more than ever, we must ask ourselves how we see progress. What is progress? We can't link this to just the to accumulation of massive amounts of resources. We must have our feet firmly on the ground and understand that in this race there are millions of people who've been left behind and are paying the consequences, paying for with many unimaginable circumstances, consequences. So we have urgency of climate change, we have extinction of our biodiversity, and we must defend nature, and we must prevent a gap becoming wider and wider between the rich and the poor. So we've had a heat wave with many fires and temperatures that have never been registered before. In October, the thermometers in several areas of our country have reached 30 degrees. So what we could call good weather has stopped being good weather halfway through autumn. So we would be mistaken if we thought this sun and this heat attracts all the tourists to our beaches, and this would be a viable or long-term goal or anything positive for our labour markets, because this short-term opportunity brings with it a new world which is endangered by this excessive heat. So we must also think of the capital involved in sustainability. We must also reflect upon a better production model which does not risk the future of our planet. So it is our task in this direction to push forward, as we've been doing in the European Union, a collective bargaining system which will also be green-based. Collective bargaining with strong trade unions that extend their protection to as many workers as possible, with socially responsible companies and permeable to the changes that are approaching. So the climate urgency means that in social dialogue we have to handle the transitions between different sectors of business and employment, requalification for workers, because thinking of climate change, we are all vulnerable, but also within this vulnerability we always have groups which will suffer more, particularly young people, but also the elderly and also women. And this is, with all these people, these are the people that we have to concentrate on now with imagination and with courage, without rejecting the hopes of providing a better world for our children. So this is what we've come to do today in this forum, in this Global Deal Forum, to think long term, to think together, without resignation, without fear. This is not about deciding who will take on the sacrifice of inequalities or putting patches or short-time solutions to the problems. This is about trying to trace collective strategies that will never lose sight of the common good and will prove that economic efficiency is possible if we respect the environment and guarantee the protection of fundamental human rights and employment rights. So it's our responsibility to provide inclusive governance models and sustainable living for all. It's our responsibility to sign global pacts or agreements like the ones that have called us here today, that are fruitful and can be extended to all labour when we're organising our production, and can provide better conditions across the planet with more renewable energies, leaving behind fossil fuels, with an environmental awareness, conscious of the nature that provides us with life. So productivity and the speed of our existence is killing many forms of human relationships. So we need an economic model, a productive model that reapproaches flexibility of employment in our workforce, that rethinks labour force, working hours, an effective way of working, but leaving time to live freely and happily and healthily, and that provides full rights to workers, and it is adapted effectively to their skills and to the market's needs. So we're talking about democratizing labour relations and transforming the work culture. We should not just be thinking about the amount of work, but also the quality of those jobs. We have to stimulate training throughout life, and also think about all possible professional careers, extending these as much as possible, and thinking about the true value of every individual, of every job, always looking for conciliation, reconciling work and home, and providing the best possible conditions for our in our working environment. So we need to face digital transition without any gaps and in a fair way. We can't have a digital world with no real world. There are not two different realities like segments that never meet. They must develop in parallel. So all the rights we have in the analog world must also govern over our lives and conditions in the digital world. So this is one of our tasks in our ministry, in our government, when after an intense debate with the social partners, we approved the so-called Rights Law. So this has opened the hearts of all the algorithms and to achieve transparency as a rule in all our negotiations and in our company work across the board in our country. Artificial intelligence cannot be opaque. It must be clearly transparent in financial organizations and all organizations so that we can incorporate society and so that society understands this language for the future. Definitively, this will be the language of digitization. We are producers of data every day in our virtual interactions every day as workers, as people participating in leisure, in the social networks, and all our transactions, etc., and also in our daily movement. And this is in our expression of consumption also. We cannot consent to having second-class citizens without access to this digital system, which is so important in our lives and so important in our opportunities. And we must not leave this tomorrow in the hands of the major corporations, the giants of email companies that so often have practices, as we've seen in Spain, that go against free competition and against solidarity. So we have to achieve decent working conditions to bring us all together. So we are delighted to see the entry of the digital markets law, which is pioneer legislation, which was up and running since last week, which allows major digital platforms to function effectively through regulations in this digital market and fight against anti-competitive behavior. So what is at risk is rules and consensus, the nucleus of our democracy. So this is also our task, that democracy, full democracy, takes over the workings of our working world with understanding our unrenounceable rights. So we have the right to safety and security, the right to knowledge, the right to digital connection, the right to expression, the right to involvement, the right to education and culture, the arts, the right to a home, to healthy food, full rights, and in an environment of peace. And it will be necessary to do this with fair salaries, moving away from this paradigm of precariousness and short-time employment, which have ruined so many life projects, because the economy must be compatible with fair and just standards of living. So this is our responsibility. This is what we are called to meet together to discuss and to. So James Baldwin, who was a defender of civil rights and also of human diversity, said that the most dangerous creation in society was a man who has nothing to lose. So this is the hope. These people would be victims of many insecurities, of unfairness, and this creates authoritarianism and autocratic regimes. Social dialogue, which calls us together today, is precisely our collective response to this. So we must reaffirm our democracy for common good and fair employment rights for all. So I'm convinced that Madrid, this forum here today, will be a fundamental part of this future, of the decisions for the future. This will be the future of our planet. Thank you very much. And I'll leave you now with our dear President of the OECD.
Vice President Diaz, Ambassador Escudero, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, friends all, I'm delighted to join you for this global deal level, high-level social dialogue forum. A very warm thank you to the government of Spain for hosting us, but also and in particular for your strong and very active support for the global deal. As Ambassador Escudero mentioned, the global deal was launched by the Swedish government back in 2016. It was developed in partnership with the OECD and the International Labour Organization, and was born out of the important ambition to support quality jobs and inclusive growth amidst constant change and disruptions in global labour markets and the world of work. Today, in 2022, as we seek to optimize not just the strength, but also the quality of the recovery from the pandemic, as we're dealing with managing the economic and social impacts of the war in Ukraine, while also managing several structural transformations, the aspirations underpinning the global deal are more important than ever. Now, with 132 partners, the global deal provides a platform of trust for governments, businesses, trade unions and other organizations to build partnerships, share best practices and to take action. Our immediate focus is inevitably drawn to the significant economic and social impacts of Russia's war of aggression against Ukraine. First and foremost, that unjustifiable and illegal war of aggression continues to have a devastating impact on the people of Ukraine. But it is also having serious implications for households and businesses around the world, working families who are grappling with the direct impacts on them of lower growth, higher inflation, in particular higher energy and food prices. A lower growth which is already causing lower investment and which we fear will lead to fewer jobs and higher unemployment over time. And high inflation, which is already causing a decrease in real wages despite widespread current labour shortages in many countries. In 2022, on average across OECD countries, we expect negative real wage growth of 2.5%. The war has dealt an especially harsh blow to low-paid workers and industries who were already hit very hard by the impact of the pandemic. In the face of a cost of living crisis, we must work together to preserve jobs and businesses while providing well-targeted support to the most vulnerable. As the 2022 Global Deal flagship report to be launched tomorrow reminds us, high-trust labour relations and a strong framework for social dialogue help mitigate the impact of shocks. A recent example can be found in Germany's chemical industry, where employers and unions agreed to respond to the unfolding economic circumstances with both a one-off payment for workers combined with a cooperative approach on wages. Our shared ambition in the global deal also encompasses longer-term structural changes in global labour markets. This includes navigating both a just transition to a net zero carbon economy and making sure that everyone has the opportunity to participate in and benefit from the digital transformation of our economies. Both the green and digital transitions present many benefits and opportunities, but they also both come with a level of disruption, in particular, a labour market churn and the need for adjustment. The green transition will be a net positive in terms of jobs. However, while that is true in aggregate, the impact will not be the same for every region or sector. The International Energy Agency projects a net global gain of 9 million jobs in energy supply by the end of this decade. However, we also know that roughly 50% of carbon-intensive jobs are concentrated in just 40 out of the 233 regions across the OECD membership. We will need to work hard and smart to address the distributional impacts of this necessary and urgent decarbonisation on businesses, workers, their families in the most affected regions and sectors. We need to improve our approach to upskilling and reskilling of workers, provide well-targeted, active employment services early, and we must leverage the power of social dialogue to help facilitate those unavoidable labour market transitions. Another issue before us at this forum is the use of non-standard forms of work. Temporary contracts, platform work and other non-standard forms of employment contribute to flexibility for both employers and workers. But they come with challenges. Access to training is more difficult for non-standard workers. They are 40 to 50% less likely to receive any form of income support during an out-of-work spell. Through social dialogue, we can and we must find shared solutions that combine businesses' needs for flexibility with the needs of workers for job security. We have seen an example of that in practice in the form of the tripartite agreement secured here in Spain in December 2021. In Italy, the government and social partners also signed a national agreement late last year, establishing a framework for the regulation of agile working in the private sector. Finally, the Global Deal flagship report also highlights the role social dialogue can play in strengthening gender equality. OECD research continues to show that, compared to men, women are less likely to work full-time, are more likely to be employed in lower-paid occupations, and are less likely to progress in their careers. The gap clearly still remains too large. This forum is an opportunity to take stock of commitments and actions by so many partners. Vice President, Ambassador, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, I wish you a positive, productive, and outcomes-focused conference over these next 2 days, and thank you so much for giving me the opportunity to say a few words.
And now we're going to listen to the Director General of the World Labour Organization, Gilbert Wongo.
Secretary General Matthias Cormann, distinguished colleagues, allow me to thank the government of Spain for hosting this forum and making these discussions possible. I'm sorry that I cannot join you in person, but I need to be here in Geneva for the meeting of the ILO's governing body. Ladies and gentlemen, the objective of the Global Deal is to promote inclusive growth and social dialogue. This fully aligns with the ILO's own mandate. Social dialogue is embedded in the DNA of the ILO. It is integral to our unique tripartite governance model. It shapes our priorities as an organization, and it guides our work in our member states as we build towards the goal of decent work for all. Social dialogue helps ensure that policies have broad acceptance and that they can effectively address work-related inequality and exclusion at both national and international levels. The Global Deal is a multi-stakeholder partnership. Its diversity is one of its greatest strengths. just as the ILO's tripartite structure is one of ours. And this diversity means that the global deal is uniquely placed to gather and promote knowledge about the value of social dialogue. Colleagues, earlier this week, the ILO published its latest monitor on the world of work. Unfortunately, the picture that the monitor paints is quite grim. Real wages are falling in many countries. Inflation is rising. This is being made worse by the fallout from the conflict in Ukraine. We can already see that the consequences are hitting low-income groups particularly hard. These multiple and mutually reinforcing crises are global. They will require multilateral, broadly accepted responses. If we are to find these, effective and inclusive social dialogue will be imperative. Equally, to take up one of these forum's other themes, social dialogue can be a powerful tool for addressing the green structural transition that we know we need, and ensuring that it's also a just transition, meaning that in future, economic benefits are more equitably shared. For example, wage negotiations that are bipartite or tripartite are far more effective in protecting the purchasing power of the most vulnerable. These are areas where our social partners have mutual and shared interests. With social dialogue, these areas of understanding can be developed and progress made toward improving conditions for both workers and enterprises. Ladies and gentlemen, the global deal gives us a unique channel through which we can work together, raise awareness about the value of social dialogue, and build trust in the foundations of lasting peace. Its diverse membership encourages innovation, which is what we need if we are to build a recovery that is sustainable, that is equitable, that is human-centered. It is an excellent example of the global partnership we need if we are to deliver on the Sustainable Development Goals. In sum, the global deal can help to place social dialogue at the core of the international agenda. Thank you so much.